Welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. I'm Christopher Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and I'm here with Sean Gonsalves, the ILSR CBN, which is Community Broadband Network's team reporter, editor extraordinaire. And what else do you do, Sean?
The communications.
That's right, communications.
And part of that, most recently, is a potential Twitter refugee.
Okay, all right. So I think this is going to run soon enough that we could just talk about this for a second. I did create a Mastodon account, but I haven't yet actually done anything with it. And I saw, in particular, I was listening to a tech show, and there was talk about how a bunch of people on Black Twitter were like,
Yes.
No, we're not leaving. Like, we built this thing. We can't just, like, abandon this. It took years for us to build this up.
That's right. That's right. Although I created a Mastodon account myself, and one of the first things that I did was do a search for hashtag Black Twitter, because I saw a number of people on Twitter saying they were going there. And then I also saw another site that I haven't looked at yet that claims to be like basically like Black Twitter. I don't know much about it, but you're right. I mean, some folks, are keeping, doing a dual citizenship, which I guess is what I'm doing at the moment. And I created a Mastodon account. Haven't done much. I'm still sort of trying to get my bearings.
I think that's how a lot of us feel. And I don't know. I kind of created it thinking there was a small chance that I would really dig into it. And after what I'm seeing this week, I just feel like Twitter's going down. It's just like, I'm surprised it hasn't had more technical problems, but I just have no faith that this is even going to exist as a platform in 2 months. Like I feel like that's a legitimate possibility now.
Right. And as much as I complain about Twitter and as much as I love to hate Twitter, it's like, I really hope it survives.
I almost never complain about Twitter. I think Twitter's great if you follow the right people.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. The ability to just be able to hear, to see what's going on with Harold Feld, what he's thinking about, just so many people that I find inspiring and interesting, people that I want to know what they're doing, what have they written lately? It's terrific.
No doubt. So I'm actually really rooting for hope against hope that Elon and company are able to pull this thing from the brink and keep the lights on.
Yeah, I would suffer some more of the Elon lovers if it meant we get to keep Twitter. I'm not invested in it failing to prove that he's awful. I already know that he's an awful person.
Yep. I feel the same.
All right. So today we're reviving once again Crazy Talk, which is something that Lisa and I started back in the day. You and I have done a couple of episodes of. Although I was thinking that we might rename it. What?
So and just to be clear, when we say Crazy Talk, do we mean ours? Do we mean the stuff that we say?
Well, that's one of the things.
Or the stuff that we come across that we think is crazy.
There are certainly people who think a lot of what I say is crazy, but it is responding not to the well-formed and well-crafted opposition that we sometimes face, where people are like, you know what, like, I don't know if cities should do this, and I want to put forth realistic evidence and that sort of thing. It's more the people who are like, even Chattanooga failed, and it's like, no, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, you're not even close. Like, it's not someone you can disagree with, because it's just someone who's like a child that's just shouting incoherent things into a megaphone that the cable and telephone companies have put in front of their drooling little face. This is one that comes to us from The Hill, an op-ed that we're going to respond to kind of paragraph by paragraph, I guess. Scott Walston, who is a PhD, and it's very important because a lot of the people that the cable and telephone companies have employed over the years have impressive initials or abbreviations after their names that they have credible. They're very serious people. Scott Walston's been someone who has long been on the side of the telephone companies in particular, I think. Usually cable and telephone companies, I think of him as. And it's called "There's Too Much Fiber in Our Broadband Diet." We'll talk about different arguments made throughout this, but like, this is one of those things that we keep hearing, and we've been hearing for a long time. So, so I don't know if you want to go first in terms of what do you think about the first few paragraphs? Like, how do you react to this argument that that we're just too focused on fiber at a policy level?
Right. So, well, the first thing that comes to mind is, the first line talks about, we've all been told to put more fiber in our diet. So the first thing as a writer, playing on words of fiber and diet was appealing. I'll never do that again.
Yeah, you're burned. Yeah, this one in particular, Scott Walston. Maybe he's always been more with the wireless companies. I get these people confused. They're not worth spending a lot of time on. But this is obviously like he's trying to just say that like fiber is going to be bad for rural America, like the focus on it. And he starts off with this dumb. I'm tired of it. Whenever you do sort of the fiber foods additive, fiber thing, like I kind of cringe a little bit. I'll be honest. So I'm glad you're not going to do it anymore.
No, I'll never do it again. Especially after this. Initially, when I first started reading it, my first impression was this sounds very much like I think it was 13 senators that sent a letter to the NTIA saying, there's essentially trying to make this case that there's too much there's too much focus on fiber. It should, that fund should be expended in a technology neutral, I think is the term that they use. So that's actually what it kind of reminded me of. So right away, it signaled to me that, where he was coming from.
How old do you think that argument is?
Well, even outside of broadband, you hear it all the time when it comes to government funding. So, I'm going to say a couple of decades.
Yeah, often from people that have crappy technology. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's who makes argument, right? It's like our technology is not as good. Not always. Like there's good reasons to have this argument in some ways. But this chafes me, and it chafes me something fierce because I just remember, and it's more than 10 years ago, I feel like, although it certainly reappeared in the intervening time, particularly with FCC Commissioner O'Reilly during battles about the Connect America Fund and Connect America Fund 2 and stuff like that, where his line was always, why are we trying to build people a Cadillac when we could give them a Chevy? And then, they expended billions upon billions of dollars to get people Chevys, and no one got a Chevy.
Right.
So like this is like there's several things that like irritate me about the beginning of this. The first is this idea that Scott Walston gives a crap about anyone in rural America getting decent internet service. He does not. If he did, he would be horrified at the way the telephone companies have misspent money that the FCC never should have given them to build better DSL out, right? That was the technology neutral argument before, was let's shovel money at AT&T and let's not pay attention to the technology because they know best. AT&T knows better than the government what people in Mississippi need, right? And people in Mississippi got nothing. And AT&T got $250 million.
Well, it's an inherently appealing argument. I mean, there's, it plays on this idea that obviously, the private sector and the brilliant folks in the private industry just know more and better than these technocrats or the bureaucrats in government, and leave it up to the experts kind of a.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing though, is that like government sometimes has experts working for it, right? I mean that's what I am. It's what you are. It's what a lot of other folks are that have looked at this seriously and don't get enormous paychecks from companies that are trying to make billions of dollars while doing very little. And the thing that kills me about this is that if they had listened to us 10 years ago, we wouldn't be spending $42.5 billion today. We would be spending less because we would have built out good networks then. But instead, we gave the money to the wrong people to build crap technology. And we are now respending money on those households. Those households have gotten, per household, hundreds or thousands of dollars to be upgraded in the last 10, 20 years. And those upgrades are not worth anything, right? Like it is not cutting the bill at all today. We are paying for those households in 2005. We're paying for them in 2015. We're paying for them in 2025 because we're not picking the good technology, because we did not pick the good technology. Finally, we are. And those households are going to get a technology that will not need to be subsidized in 2035. But this guy wants them to be subsidized in 2035 again, right? Because the market will be deciding in 2035 to do what to do with $100 billion we got to put into it next time.
Right.
It's like these guys come off as like being like, we got to be responsible with the public dollars. And I'm like, y'all are like spending the public dollars wastefully.
Right. I mean, right off the bat, right in the second paragraph, he talks about that sort of this focus on fiber runs the risk of cost overruns and delayed build out. But it's like, I mean, that's true of anything, of any project. There's always a risk of cost overruns and delayed build out. So I don't know why that, he doesn't explain why that only relates to fiber builds. Yeah,
no, I mean, people in Mississippi have been waiting for, at this point, some of them 8 years, maybe, certainly 5-6 years for AT&T to do its DSL build out. That was supposed to be fast. And many of them never got it. So then he moves on to future proof. And this is another thing that gets my goat. Like he's like, well, it's not future proof because like in a million years it probably won't be there, right? Because that's what when Sean, you love talking about future proof. I argue with you sometimes about how
right. I throw that word around a lot. You're right, but right. But the idea that somehow something isn't future proof because it's not immortal or it won't last, forever or into eternity is pretty ridiculous on the face of it.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you have to look at these things in comparison to what,
right?
So I guess in that sense, the term future proof does sort of invite those kind of criticisms for those who think that you're scoring points by pointing out that, well, not forever, it won't last for a million years or it won't last for 200 years, but the real question is, does it last longer than other? That's actually the more important question, and there isn't a real debate about that.
Yeah, no, he talks about how fiber's got a shelf life of 25 years. Not really sure what shelf life has to do with it because it's in the ground, it's on the poles. He talks about how things can happen with different temperatures and stuff like that. And that's true. But we also know that a lot of that fiber that's out there is more than 25 years old. At this point, it's 2022. It's nearly 2023, which boggles my mind.
Yeah.
But you know what that means? That means that the fiber that was put in the ground as part of the .com boom is 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It's still being used. So I guess tomorrow it has to be retired. And so I drive this nuts. But let's just assume for a second he was right. Okay, let's say it's 25 years. Let's compare the cost of building that 25-year network against whatever he wants to do with wireless in these areas. And let's compare the full life costs of that fiber network over 25 years versus the wireless cycle that he wants to use instead and see what's more economical. And I'm going to guess that in the vast majority of cases, fiber will be more economical than having to rebuild that wireless network between, I would say, over 25 years. You probably got, between 4 and 7 network rebuilds, depending. Maybe people might say that's aggressive. Maybe it's only, if you wait a real long time, maybe it's only, I think 3 years is hard to imagine. I think you're rebuilding that network 4 times if it's wireless over 25 years. I'm not an expert. Maybe someone will, on connect this, maybe someone will come on and tell me that I'm underestimating that. But this guy, I don't even think, first of all, I don't think Scott Walston knows anything about this technology. He's just repeating stuff again, like a child. But he gets over this, and then he says that fiber to the premise happens to be the most expensive and time and labor intensive way to deliver connectivity. It's $40,000 per mile. But we could do fixed wireless or Starlink. It's way more cost effective to connect rural Americans. Now, do you think that in his home, when his children are going to school, that he's on Starlink or fixed wireless?
Yeah, absolutely not.
I would not expect that he was. Most of the people who want to talk about how great those things are themselves on a fiber network or a DOCSIS 3.1 cable network in the Beltway.
Right.
They're not working from fixed wireless. They're certainly not on a fixed wireless network that doesn't work very well, which is sometimes the case. Some of the fixed wireless networks are really great. Some of them are downright awful.
Right. Too often these kind of arguments are made by folks in that situation where, it inherently implies, I've got what I need. And, for those who don't, let's give them bargain basement type stuff and then kind of say, hey, it's good enough.
Absolutely. And not just that, but ignoring the costs, right, of Starlink. It's $100 a month. It's $100 a month. It's maybe $110 a month now. Who knows what it's going to be soon, particularly with the pressures that's going on. Who even knows if in a year Elon Musk companies exist in the way that they do today?
Right. Right.
There's a lot.
Well, and also, you say $100 a month, but that's after what isn't it? Something like $600 to.
Yeah, $600 to get started. And I think that, to give this guy credit, he's probably saying that sure, over 25 years, that's going to be, what's that going to be? $30,000? Because that's what, $110 a month. That's $1,300 a year. So, you're looking at with that startup costs and everything, between $25,000 and $30,000. And even probably if we're talking about 25 years, inflation and whatnot. I'm not going to do the net present value calculation, but you're looking at on the order of $30,000. Suddenly, I'm talking myself out of this. It's insane to think that we should be subsidizing Starlink for that period of time.
Right.
Like, dang, we got to get these people. I mean, you know what John Chambers charges on the fiber networks he's building with all those rural electric co-ops? It's like $60 a month. So I mean, I guess the proper calculation is like what, $40 a month difference of subsidy in theory, and so that's about $1,000 a year. No, it's $500 a year. Sorry. So it's more like a $10 to $12,000 subsidy over 25 years. Still, that's a heck of a subsidy to be committing to, rather than just getting it done right. There are homes that will cost $20,000-$30,000 to connect. They are few and far between. Most homes averaged out. I mean, I haven't run the numbers on this, but I'm going to guess that we're looking at like
2,500.
No, I think it'd be like 3,500 to 4,000 maybe, but like it could be down. Like I think 2,500 is more like suburbs.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
but like in the more rural areas, but you still like average together like a lot of these in the electric footprints. I don't think you're looking at like an average of 10K. It will depend on where you are. Maybe in Wyoming, but like, South Carolina, your costs are not going to be like anywhere near that, in rural areas, I don't think.
And what, see, here's the thing too. And I know that in writing these kind of op-ed things or whatever, there's always like space constraints. You can't put in everything. But one of the sort of cardinal rules of journalism, at least as I was taught it, is the all important of context. And so when you're talking about where he says on average, the cost of laying fiber is over $40,000 per mile, it would be nice to include the cost per mile is of building other kinds of infrastructure like bike paths or roads or electric transmission lines. And that happens a lot in this space when it comes to talking about fiber networks, is that it's often discussed without putting in that all important context of how expensive things are for other types of infrastructure that no one ever says municipalities or cities or should not be building.
Yes. So that's a terrific point. And I would just raise you one by saying the other costs that people never consider is what is the cost of these kids in rural areas or these kids in cities and suburbs who don't have an internet connection, whether that's because of infrastructure or whether that's because of affordability or some other issue. What is the cost to them for those, what is our lifetime cost to children that are not well educated because they don't have opportunity? Right. And many of them, I shouldn't say many of them, some number of them will correctly recognize society doesn't care about them. And they will be like, why should I care about society? And they're going to go off and engage in criminal enterprises, right? Like, right. I feel like a fair amount of that comes from people who are like, I got to get mine because nobody cares about me. No one's looking out for me. And when you grow up and you know that people have these like wonderful opportunities around you and you don't, it poisons your soul when we don't have that kind of equal access.
Right. And it's which is why it's sort of ironic or whatever that, he talks about sort of the myopia focusing on fiber. But there is a real myopia when you're doing sort of a cost benefit analysis, the way he's laying out here, that doesn't take into those kind of factors that you're pointing to. It also strikes me now that I'm looking at this as well. He spends a little bit of time talking about sort of the natural degradation of fiber networks over time. The real issue is not whether or not there's degradation over time or whether or not things need to be fixed down the road. The question is more, a comparison of, well, that's also true of other networks, and what kind of degradation do you see in those other networks, and how much more expensive is it to fix in a comparative sense?
Right.
A real thrust of this piece too is just talking about how costly and silly it probably is to build out fiber, particularly in rural communities. He sort of says, in more densely populated areas, yes, but in rural communities, it's not really the way to go, and it doesn't really work. North Dakota, South Dakota, is pretty well fiberized, is my understanding. Am I right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I feel like this presupposes is that NTIA is going to force people to use fiber, but that's of course not how this is structured. States will be deciding a point at which where the cost per home is deemed to be too high, and that's going to be different in different states based on the state's subjective decision about what is too much. At that point, they will be able to use other technologies. And I feel like I'm one of those people that's often accused of being fiber only, and I'm not. we talk about this frequently, and on the Connect This show, we talk about how a sensible policy in some cases is certainly to build out fixed wireless to some areas in order to get them something quickly. This is what RS Fiber did in Minnesota, and I'm still very supportive of that approach. But I want that to be done by a company that is not going to milk that market. I want it done by a company that will be responsive as their needs grow, and as you have time and capacity to build fiber out to people, that happens, because that is fundamentally the most economically responsible decision if we're thinking about this over multiple decades. People like Scott Walston, I just feel like they're so focused on like what will keep the companies that support them, what will keep their stock price high over the next several years. They're not thinking about 20 or 30 years in the future. They don't care, what's happening.
And unfortunately, they don't really have to. I mean, especially the way this type of stuff works. The attention span on sort of these kind of debates is very short.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to think what the United States would look like today if Scott Walston was the one who was like, this interstate thing is a fad, right? And I say that knowing that some people might be like, well, we could do with fewer interstates. I think that's true. We are too much of a car culture, but it also supercharged our economy, right? Like we have a level of abundance, and it's changed the way we live our lives in ways that is good for rich people and poor people alike, that I think I would not want to go back and rerun that experiment without it. I think we're good to have ability to travel. And I think government investment needs to be making long-term bets on improving the foundation of markets, and having high quality internet access out to everyone is a part of that, as opposed to these people who are like, I think people should just get whatever some company decides they should get. And, if that company's there first, cool, then they get that. And if some other company wants to come in, maybe it'll happen and maybe it won't. Who knows?
Right. But of course, when you have a situation where there's only one provider, the incentive is really like, all right, let's build the cheapest thing we can and charge as much as possible. I mean, and his piece doesn't take any of that kind of stuff into account, of course, because that's precisely where these things go. What's the cheapest thing to build, and how can we extract as much from our subscribers as is possible? Yeah.
And this is how he ends. Asking taxpayers to shoulder the risk of costly projects under the false premises that they are future-proof is irresponsible and could see Americans paying off debt far past the useful life span of the network they paid for. Well, that's just not happening. Even if it's 25 years, I think that we will have paid off this debt. I worry about debt, seriously. Like I think we have to have tough conversations about taxpayer dollars. But those tough conversations need to respond to this idea. The only thing we should worry about is overspending. We have lost the productivity of millions of children who don't have good internet access. We could have built that 10 years ago. We didn't. We spent billions of dollars, right? Tens of billions of dollars, arguably, inefficiently, in ways that Scott Walston tells us we should. And he never wants to reckon with that, right? He just wants to look forward and say, don't spend too much. My clients over here, the big cable and telephone companies, the big wireless companies, it would be bad for them if you spend too much. So I'm going to come up with all these reasons why you shouldn't. But we're never going to talk about how many kids we're shortchanging, how we're shortchanging economic growth and innovation by not spending money on that stuff, right? Sean, you're a little bit older than I am. Like the space race, all this stuff, like today we are still living off of the innovations that came from public spending and an improvement in public schools because of the space race. Like you and I benefited from that. And like now our kids aren't.
But that kind of history is very rarely told and not well known. And so you can kind of make these kind of arguments in that vacuum, knowing that most people, don't really have a sense of that.
That's right.
Which to me is what, it's sort of glaringly obvious. But it isn't. I mean, it only is obvious if you kind of follow this stuff.
Right. And I think, like you said, I think a good op-ed includes the right context.
Yes, absolutely. Or at least to be, at least to be honest, like for me, the standard that I haven't always met for sure, but there's this John Stuart Mill quote. J.S. Mill quote. It says, "He who knows only his own side of the case knows very little of that." And I used to always use that as a benchmark, because I always feel like if an argument doesn't take into account or acknowledge the most articulate counter argument, then it's not really worth a whole lot. There's a level of dishonesty to me in putting forward arguments that don't acknowledge the things that, your most articulate opponent would say immediately.
Absolutely.
It's not a sort of a final arbiter as to who's right or wrong per se, but to me, I almost automatically discount arguments that don't take into account certain things that we've kind of brought up here in our discussion here. It's like, come on, you can't really take it serious if you're not at least honestly wrestling or acknowledging, some of these things. I mean, it's possible to make a case for something without misrepresenting the actual case.
Right. And I think this is where, when we talk about wireless, I want to be clear. Wireless has been improving. Wireless will keep improving. There are going to be limits because of how we mismanage spectrum to preference Scott Walston's clients, and his, well, I don't know if they're actually clients, I should say his backers. And so it's not the case that wireless can't do a good job. Like, there's a bunch of people out there who live in areas where wireless could do an okay job and it will work. It won't be as reliable. It won't be as fast. It will be more costly to operate over the longer term. But there are a lot of other people who will be left behind when we're not committed to building fiber out, who live on the wrong side of the hill, or who can't afford $110 a month for Starlink. So I just feel like I get frustrated at these people because we're trying to figure out what works best for everyone. And frankly, I am often thinking, I don't want to screw over the big companies. Like, I do think to the extent they have put investments into places, like, we should not just trample it without being, thoughtlessly trample it.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Mm-hmm.
But like, it's an uneven playing field because I just feel like people like him are like hiding the ball constantly, and they don't want to talk about what the actual consequences of their policy are. Going another, 5 years where we pretend that wireless is going to go out to all these places when it's not, because he's not serious about policy. He's advocating for a few big companies that write big checks to nonprofits to advance those positions. Right.
So much of what he's put out here is about sort of, he spends some time talking about fiber networks don't really last that long, kind of an argument. And, I would be interested to hear his response to, okay, So if we have all this aging fiber out there, what do we replace it with? More fiber, right? I mean,
well, that's one of the things too, is that when the fiber comes due, this is something that one of our listeners of our work, David Asp at Dakota County, there's schools that 30 years ago put fiber in to connect their schools, and they put it in conduit and systems in an intelligent way because they were thinking ahead, the way often people who take this seriously, engineers working for government, do it right. They did it, and that fiber is still working fine, but there's 12 strands. And so he will go in sometimes on a weekend and they will shut it all down and they will pull the 12 strands out and they will put 144 back in. And this isn't like millions of dollars of investment, right? This is a couple of people pulling fiber through tubes in order to give it another 25 or 30 years. And they do that not because that 12 strands have gone bad, but because they want more capacity, and it's a very low cost upgrade. And the schools will then be able to do more things with it. And so, like, that's what happens after this 25-year mythical period in many cases, right? Now, it could be different if you're on poles and things like that. But, like, again, it's not going to be as expensive, and it's not nearly as bad as he wants to suggest.
So you mean nobody's ripping out conduit and fiber and replacing it with fixed wireless?
It would be very rare for that to be happening. I mean, it's been 4 or 5 years, but every year people go to the Wispalooza show, and those folks are doing great work with wireless, but they're always shocked. They're like, a lot of people are just talking about fiber. And it's true, because a lot of the WISPs are into fiber. Fiber is an important part of their business case, and there's some people who want to use it as some kind of gotcha, and that's dumb. A lot of these WISPs are companies that care about their community and are trying to do something good, and they're using the technology that is available to them. Mm-hmm. And when I'm nervous about putting money into wireless, it's not because I don't like them. I like a lot of those guys. Some of them are terrible. Like, some of them are just really bad. But most of them are good folks who are trying to do good work for their communities. And the thing is that, like, when we have a problem with like a neighborhood that's been disinvested in, we don't say to that neighborhood, you should have more bake sales so you can build your own street. right? We say this is civil infrastructure. This is important for the economy, for our entire country, for our entire state, whatever. Right. And government is supposed to come in. Like most of the economic economic activity in Minnesota is in major cities, right? And like yet that money pays for roads all throughout the state, and the state pays money into things that go back into the metro and stuff like that. Like we're in this together because like if we're not doing that, if we're not building the right infrastructure, then we're not going to be able to succeed. And I feel like there are people who have said, I'm going to be able to provide this level of wireless, and I think that's good enough for the community. And I don't want to tell them that they're bad people, because they're not bad people. But I want to say it might be the wrong tool in some cases, given the need that we have to make sure that everyone has high quality access that works all the time, that is affordable. And that comes to a head with our love of small businesses at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. But like infrastructure is infrastructure.
Right. We touched on it briefly, but it comes up a lot, and it might be worth circling back on. In here, he talks about relying on low Earth orbit satellite providers like Starlink or fixed wireless that can beam connectivity, often far more cost effective and faster ways to connect rural Americans. Now, I have no experience with Starlink whatsoever. I've heard from some folks who have it, who love it. I've heard from other folks who say, we talked a little bit about the cost and how that is a real issue for folks who are financially strapped. But I like the way that you talk about Starlink, and it might be worth mentioning because I do hear out in different places where I may, give a talk or something like that. It's often a question where there's this idea in people's head that Starlink is the answer for rural America.
Well, Elon Musk doesn't think it's the answer for rural America, right? I mean, like he knows a bit about it. His team doesn't think it's the answer for rural America. They're aiming at as many as 5% of the population. And if you have an isolated area where you have a high density of people, you can only get so much signal there based on the physics. And so there are real challenges with saying we're just going to rely on Starlink. Now, you get isolated homes here and there. Absolutely. It might be $60,000. It might be $80,000. It could be more to bring a fiber connection. It might be tens of thousands of dollars to build towers to be able to do a wireless connection. That's a pretty good candidate for Starlink, right? Like there's a lot of good candidates for Starlink, more than enough to, I think, pay the bills. But anyone who says that this is a general solution for rural America, well, not even the company thinks that.
Right. No, well put.
So with that, we're going to have to cut it short. We're going to do another one of these before too long. If you think we beat this to death too much, if you like this level of detail, always feel free to let us know. Send us a tweet or a toot if you can find us on Mastodon, and send us an email, and we love to get feedback, positive, constructive, whatever.
That's right.
Thank you, Sean.
All right. Thank you.
We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at muninetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Twitter. His handle is @CommunityNets. Follow muninetworks.org stories on Twitter. The handle's @muninetworks. Subscribe to this and other podcasts from ILSR, including Building Local Power, Local Energy Rules, and the Composting for Community podcast. You can access them anywhere you get your podcasts. You can catch the latest important research from all of our initiatives if you subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount keeps us going. Thank you to Arnie Hughesby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons. This was the Community Broadband Bits podcast. Thanks for listening.